for x not 0, y not 0, x over y to the opposite of a, or negative a, is y over x to the a. So a negative exponent tells you to take the reciprocal of the base. The base is x over y. The reciprocal of x over y is y over x. So a negative exponent tells one to take the reciprocal of the base. Now let's look at some examples. 4 to 0 power is 1. Any base raised to 0th power is 1. So if you have a non-zero base with exponent 0, your answer is going to be 1. Let's look at 4 cubed. Well, 4 cubed has a positive exponent. If you have a positive integral exponent, then the positive integer simply tells you the number of times that you use the base as a factor. So the positive integer 3 tells me to use the base 4 as a factor 3 times. So it would be 4 times 4 times 4, which is 64. Now what happens if you have a negative exponent? 4 to the negative 3. A negative exponent tells me to take the reciprocal of the base. So the reciprocal of 4 is 1/4. So 4 to the negative 3 will be 1 over 4 to the positive 3. Negative exponent, take the reciprocal. Now leave the 1, and 4 cubed means 4 times 4 times 4, which is 64. So 4 to the negative 3 is 1 over 64. Notice that 4 to the negative 3 is the reciprocal of 4 to the positive 3. And that's what I want you to understand. A negative exponent tells you to take the reciprocal. Now what about the opposite of powers? If you have the opposite of 4 to the 0, you need to put in the parentheses. If there are no parentheses, then the parentheses are understood to go around the power. So there are no parentheses, so I put them in. Leave the opposite outside. This is read the opposite of 4 to the 0 power. So the negative sign goes outside the parentheses. If there are no parentheses, the negative sign is left outside. So doing what's in the parentheses, 4 raised to 0th power is 1. The opposite of 1 is negative 1. Now in this case, we do have the parentheses, and the negative is inside the parentheses. In this case, the negative is part of the base. So if you have negative 4 to the negative 2, you take the reciprocal of the base, negative 4. So it would be 1 over negative 4 squared. Now negative 4 squared means negative 4 times negative 4. A negative times a negative is positive. So a negative 4 times a negative 4 is a positive 16. So I get as my answer 1/16. Negative 4 to the negative 2 is equal to 1 over negative 4 squared, which is 1/16. Now what happens if the negative is outside, or what happens if you do not have parentheses? If you do not have parentheses, you leave the negative outside the parentheses. So be sure, if you do not have parentheses, to put them in. When you put them in, the negative will stay outside. So I work inside symbols of inclusion first. I do the 4 to the negative 2 first. So I would have the opposite of 1 over 4 squared. A negative exponent tells me to take the reciprocal of the base. The reciprocal of 4 would be 1 over 4. Now of course, 1 over 4 squared would be 1 over 16. So I have the opposite of 1/16, which is a negative 1/16. Fractions as bases provide no more of a problem than numbers, or than integers, except you have to do it more often or more times. If you have 2/3 squared, the base is 2/3. Notice the whole thing's in parentheses. The positive integer 2 tells me to use the base as a factor 2 times. So 2/3 squared means 2/3 times 2/3. Then I simply multiply. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 3 is 9. Now if you have 2/3 to the negative 2, then the negative exponent tells me to take the reciprocal of the base. The reciprocal of 2/3 is 3/2. So 2/3 to the negative 2 would be 3/2 to the positive 2. 3/2 to the positive 2 means 3/2 times 3/2, which is 9/4.